Let's face it, recording music is super confusing at first. When you've never done it before, it's so frustrating when something inevitably doesn't work and you inevitably spend hours on the internet trying to figure it out. That was exactly my experience when I first started recording, so to prevent you from having some of the same headaches, let's walk through the entire process step by step using GarageBand. Here we go. So first of all, what do you need to buy before you start recording music? Well, if you're serious about your recordings, you're definitely going to want a microphone. As far as what mic to buy, there are an absolute ton of different options out there and it gets really overwhelming, but keep in mind it mainly depends on what you're recording and how much you're willing to spend. There are several different categories and subcategories of microphones, which makes it a really fun but vast topic for another video. But to get you started, the most fundamental division between microphone types are USB mics and XLR mics. USB mics obviously connect straight to your computer via a USB cable, and XLR mics use an XLR cable to connect to an audio interface, which it then connects to the computer via USB cable. In general, your best bet for recording music is going to be an XLR mic. Now, that's not to say USB mics are bad or anything, but most of them are better designed for podcasting, web calls, voiceovers, that kind of thing. They are more convenient, but honestly, it's not that hard to use an audio interface. So if you use an XLR mic, you're obviously going to need a cable and an audio interface, and there are links to the ones I use down in the description, but do your own research as well just to make sure that they're going to be the right choice for you. Software-wise, you're going to need a digital audio workstation, or DAW. This is just the program that you use to record. Apple devices come equipped with GarageBand, which is perfectly workable, and it's what we'll be using in this walkthrough. If you're on Windows, I recommend checking out Reaper, which is a super versatile DAW and free for 60 days. It does have a bit of a learning curve, but in all honesty, it's probably worth it, especially if you want to move on and make better and more recordings in the future. Of course, there are also paid softwares like Logic Pro, Pro Tools, and Ableton. These are pretty popular among professionals, and you can check these out yourself to see if one might be right for you. Okay, the last thing you'll need is headphones. You probably already have some, they're probably not that fancy, but as long as they don't bleed noise, they'll work. So let's jump into the recording process. Plug your audio interface into your computer and turn it on. Plug your mic into the interface, plug your headphones into the interface, and open up the DAW. Now GarageBand is going to give you this prompt, and you want to set the input and output to the audio interface. So that way it's going to record from the mic, which is plugged into the interface, and you'll hear the playback through the headphones, which are also plugged in the interface. And you'll probably also want to monitor your instrument, so you can check that if you'd like. And now we have basic controls right here, obviously. And then this toggles your library. If you're not going to use any of these sounds, you can just hide it. This toggles between the control panel down here and the editor panel. I would just hide that for now, and already everything looks a lot simpler. So this button up here turns the click track on and off, and this number controls the tempo for the click track. You can set the time signature, and if you're not using any of GarageBand's built-in instruments, you can just ignore the key signature. So now you can test some things out. Make sure that your mic's gain, aka sensitivity setting, isn't too high or low. You adjust that on the interface. And you can make sure that you hear playback through the headphones properly, etc., etc. So before we record any final takes, we always start by recording some other tracks first that will provide a backing for us to play to. These are called scratch tracks because they're not going to make it into the final product. Once you've recorded final takes how you want them, you can then mute or delete the scratch, basically just like a stencil for the musical recording. So the scratch could be drums, bass, rhythm guitar. You basically just want to lay down a solid foundation for the rest of the project. I typically like to record some scratch mandolin chops to serve as the snare, and then I'll do rhythm guitar, a scratch lead vocal possibly if there are going to be vocals, and then record the final parts. And you record these while listening to the click track. So in the end, a 3-instrument project might look something like this. And I've already deleted the scratch here, but you can see I have a few final backup tracks and a few separate tracks for solos. Because given that I'm not really great at nailing things on the first try every time, I typically like to record my solos separate from the rhythm so I can have as many tries as I want. So once you've done all that, mute the scratch and turn off the metronome, and it's now time to mix the tracks, aka adjust the volume and all that stuff. So you can spend hours watching YouTube videos about EQ settings and how to get an optimal mix every time, but really if you're just getting into recording music, there are a whole lot of other things that are going to improve your sound way more than having an optimal mix will. So right here, I'm just going to balance the volume of the tracks so one's not too loud or too quiet. And if you listen here, ignore how off time everything is. You can hear that this mandolin chop is kind of loud in the mix, so I'm going to bring that back a bit and just adjust this until all the tracks' volumes sound balanced with each other. And then I'll probably just make some basic EQ adjustments here, like rolling off the high and low end frequencies, and that's pretty much as far as you need to go as a beginner. Now, if you want to add video to your recordings, you can either just video yourself as you're recording, obviously, or you can record the audio first and then video yourself later playing the exact same thing. Either way, just import both the finished audio and the finished video into a video editor, sync the two up, and then mute the video's audio. So in the end, you'll have the finished audio and the video on top of each other. And that's the fundamentals of acoustic multi-track recording. There's absolutely a sea of information out there about this topic, and it's very overwhelming but fun to dive into. So if you get confused about any of this, please just drop a comment. I'll do my best to answer all of your guys' great questions. I love hearing from all of you. See you next time.